Okay, 10th grade, this is lesson number 4 in our unit on human physiology, and it's called From Cell to Organism. So first things first, take a minute and write in your second big idea. How do body systems differ between species? So that's something you should keep in mind as you're doing your research task in last class and today's class, and kind of starting to build examples for your big idea. So pause the video, write down that big idea. Okay, and here is today's template. So it's 2 pages. The first 2 here aren't too big. This is a little bit longer, so you need more space. You can always do it on this side as well. This is a very big diagram. You need to make sure you have space to draw. Only one diagram to draw to, but it's a big one. And then again, some space for your research. So today's called From Cell to Organism. So pause the video, draw your template. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about the hierarchy of life. So on the very first day of this unit, we saw a diagram, and here's a piece of it here that I cropped out, and that talked about physiology going from an atom all the way to an ecosystem. And we're going to be focusing on the kind of 5 central components of that, and these goes from cell to tissues, organs, organ systems to organism. That is known as the hierarchy of life. We're going to talk about these today and focus on them because we're going to start getting into examples next class. So the very first thing here are cells, which I'm sure you're very familiar with from previous science courses. And cells are the smallest component of life, and they're considered alive and components of life because they can perform the 7 functions of life. And those functions are metabolism, reproduction, homeostasis, growth, response, excretion, and nutrition. So we are going to go through what those means in example analysis in a little minute here, but first I want to double check that you guys all remember what cells are and the 2 types of cells. So here's an image of the 2 main types of cells. Can you remember what those actually are and what some examples of each might be? So the names of these 2 types of cells, the more complicated one here is the eukaryote. That's because it has this membrane-bound nucleus. So the nucleus here has a membrane. It's much more complicated. It's all these organelles, has mitochondria, it has the nucleolus, it has the endoplasmic reticulum, a whole lot of more structures than are present in a prokaryotic cell. And this is a prokaryote. It just has a nucleoli, like a clump of DNA or RNA. It doesn't have a membrane-bound system and a much simpler structure. Okay, so those are the 2 main cell types. Now, what are some examples of each? Well, every cell in animals, plants, fungi, protists, those all are made of eukaryotic cells. So all our cells are eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells tend to be unicellular organisms. So things like bacteria, archaeans, those are usually the ones you have that are prokaryotes. So we're not going to spend much time on this, but it should be a reminder that you should definitely have learned probably in middle school. Okay, so here is those 7 functions of life again, but kind of written out in a way to hopefully explain a little better for you. So metabolism is the ability of organisms to convert energy. So for example, for us, we can convert energy from sugar to ATP, an active form of energy. We can convert long-term energy storage like fat into energy we can actually use in our cells, that kind of things, energy conversion. Reproduction, so heredity, can they reproduce and pass on their DNA? Homeostasis, can they maintain a constant internal environment? Growth, can they get bigger? Response, can they react to stimuli and adapt? So if the stimulus for us might be maybe you hear a sound, you react to it. You feel cold or warm, you react to it. You see something, you react to it somehow. Excretion is getting rid of waste and toxins, so we use our respiratory system for that, for urine, and also we have a digestive system to help with that as well. And nutrition is getting the energy, so we can actually go and find the energy source we need. This right here, metabolism, is about converting the energy once we have it. This is about getting the energy. So the way to remember this list is Mr. H. Gren. So that's why these letters are these colors. So metabolism, reproduction, homeostasis, growth, response, excretion, nutrition. You need to memorize this. So take some time and start kind of making it part of your study habits to go over this. Okay? So here's a plant, and here are some bacteria, and I want you to watch the little gifs I have here of them doing what they do, and decide if they both have the 7 functions of life or not. So here's the plant, and then here's the bacteria. So pause the video and think about this. Do they have all 7? Well, hopefully figured out that yes, they do. Both of them have very clear, so let's look at the plant first. Metabolism. We know plants convert energy to grow and to become big like any other organism. Same thing as bacteria. They're going to also be converting energy. Reproduction, what's happening here, they're reproducing binary fission, and the plant can also reproduce. We know they produce flowers and seeds and fruit to reproduce. Homeostasis, both of them are reacting to an environment and taking in maybe water is a good one example for both of these. Regulating how they're osmotic regulators, how much water they have inside their bodies, for lack of a better word. They can both grow. So you notice the beginning here, the cells get longer before they divide in half. Of course, we know plants can grow. Reacting to stimuli. So if you notice here, the plant is moving. It's reacting to light. It's called a phototropism, where the plant moves towards light. If you've probably seen it before, if you haven't, if you Google phototropism, it's some really cool videos of it. And then bacteria, of course, will move towards food sources. They can respond to stimuli. Both of them can get rid of waste based on whatever they're producing and they don't need. So, for example, in plants, one waste product they produce is oxygen, and they lose it through leaves. We talked about that a little bit already last class. And nutrition, energy source for plants, that's going to be photosynthesis, and in bacteria, that's going to be being a consumer and consuming some sort of energy source from its host or its environment. Okay, so Mr. H. Gren. Okay, so let's talk about the next level. So we have the cell level. The next level is only happening in multicellular organisms. So unicellular organisms, unicellular means uni, one, cellular cell. So one cell only, like a bacterium. There are quite a few of them on our planet, but there are also a lot of multicellular, which multi, of course, means many. So we have many cells, including ourselves. We are multicellular. So in a multicellular organism, the next level from a cell is tissues. So tissues is a group of cells, and those cells work together for a certain function, and they have structures that let them perform that function. So we're looking at examples for this of the respiratory system in humans. So the alveoli here, the little kind of sacs that you used for gas exchange, they are made of connective tissue. So that's a tissue type in the body, and these little structures here, a tiny part of your lungs, those are made of connective tissue, and they have a very thin wall, and they're very they look like air sacs. So that's where the gases are exchanged, where oxygen comes in and carbon dioxide comes out. They have to have that kind of shape to allow that to happen. We'll talk more about that next class. After the tissues, we have the organ. So the organ here would be the entire lung, right? The lungs is an organ. So the alveoli are one of many different types of tissue. The connective tissue are many types of tissue that make up the lungs. Also have epithelial tissue in the esophagus and the bronchi, other kinds of tissue as well. So we have many cells making a tissue and many tissues making an organ. Okay, so think about a plant. What might be some of the tissues and organs of a plant? Well, organs of plant, leaves, flowers, stem, fruits are all plant organs. And tissues could be things like there's what's called the vascular tissue, which is where the plants are going to be moving like sap up and in a tree. If you think of good old maple syrup, the sap's running in the spring, that's in a tissue system of plants. You also have ground tissue in the leaves and the trunk. The majority of it is ground tissue. There's different tissues that work together to make those organs. Okay, so let's go to the next couple levels here. So within a multicellular organism, after I have an organ, I'm going to have an organ system where I have multiple organs working together to make an entire system, such as the respiratory system. Here's the respiratory system as a whole. That's an example of an organ system in humans. How many different organs can you name that are part of that? Well, here's a list. The nose or the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, The trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs are all examples of organs which make up the respiratory system. We will go through this more next class, the respiratory system in particular. The last level is the organism level. So the human body is made of many different organ systems. We can't function with just one. In fact, we have 11 organ systems, and they all of them need to have a certain function and certain structure to be able to have our body function as a whole. So how many of those different systems can you list? Use the picture here to kind of give you a hint. There's 11 though, only 5 in that picture. Well, the respiratory system, the nervous system, the digestive system, the circulatory system, the endocrine system, which is how you have hormones, the excretory system, which has to do with your kidneys and producing urine, the integumentary system, which is your skin, the muscular system, the skeletal system, reproductive system, and the immune/lymphatic system. So there's 11 systems in the human body to make up an organism. You need all 11 to make up a functioning organism for humans. Okay, so this is the diagram I want you to draw. I want you to make sure you're doing not just humans, you're focusing on other organisms as well. So you need to make sure you include the plant part as well as the human part. So here if we look at, I have plant cells. Here I have tissues, the ground tissue inside a leaf. The organ is the leaf. The organ system would be the kind of branch of all the leaves branching together. And the organism is the entire thing from the roots all the way up to the top. And then here the example is digestive system. So we have the individual cells in the small intestine, which make up these tissue structures called, it's the microvilli lining of the small intestine. Wow, guys. So that's a tissue that makes up a small intestine organ, which is one part of the digestive system, which works with 10 more systems to make up the entire human organism. So the number of systems and the complexity does vary by organism, but every organism that's multicellular has all of these parts. Unicellular only have this part. Okay, so make sure you draw this and you describe. So if you find this online using digital notes, that's fine, but then describe what each of them is. Make sure it's clear to you. Okay, so that's the end of the lesson for today. What you have to do to kind of apply this knowledge is take a new organism. It can be the same one from last class or a new one. I recommend a new one because big idea number 2 is about comparing different species body systems. So the more species you're familiar with, the better you'll be able to answer big idea number 2. Research how it performs the 7 functions of life and work through as one example from cell to organism. So we did respiratory systems, we did eukaryotic cell, we said it was connective tissue, then it was the lungs, then it was respiratory system, and then it was the human body. So work through all 5 levels in your chosen organism. Make sure you're using the correct terminology. Vocabulary is a huge part of biology that a lot of students underestimate. Make sure you use the right words and you get used to using them and spelling them correctly. Okay. Connect back to big idea number 2. Remember, you're going to have to fill that out in a couple lessons, and you can have multiple examples from many species, not just humans. Okay, so your homework is to upload all your notebook pictures from today's lesson. If you're doing digitally, you have to download it and upload the document to Schoology. Please don't share a Google document with me. I have way too much to keep track of to do it that way. Include your research, and next week I have tentatively scheduled a quiz for next Wednesday. Now, because of what was happening with my family this week, I'm a little bit behind, so I will look at that, but I want to give you a heads up, there is a quiz coming up. Usually we have it after lesson 6, and this is lesson 4. So we are moving along. All right, guys, I hope you're home safe and taking care of yourselves, and that you have a good day. As always, any questions, please feel free to email me.